Okay, welcome back everybody. I'm here for another Python tutorial. Last time we learned how to make a class in Python and use some of its features. We will have more advanced features on classes coming up soon. But now what I want to talk about is how to import functions defined in different files into a file you want to use currently. And so let me just give you an idea of what I mean. So let's say we have two files in Python. And as we often have Python programs with many files, in one file you will have functions defined, and in another file you will call these functions for use within a certain workflow. Because this is a more modular approach to programming, and you're not going to want to have every single piece of code for your program all in one file. You will need multiple files being able to communicate with each other. And so in Python, how do you use code from one file in another file? And that's what we're going to learn today in this video. So the first thing what we're going to do is we are going to make a file, and we are going to call it file1.py. Okay, so I'm just going to make some comments here. This file will be our main file. Okay, so let's call it. Let's first define our main function. You don't need to do this. This is just an arbitrary example for the purpose of learning. So def main. Okay, so here we have defined a function main who takes no arguments. And what we're going to do, because we are good coders, is we are going to document this function. Okay, this is the main function of our program. Okay, now what we're going to do is we are going to, in this main function, we are going to call a function that we are going to define in a separate file. Okay, so let's exit out of here. So just going to keep this like this for now. We're going to exit out and we're going to make a new file. So this was that file2. And we'll just do some comments here at the top. In this file, we will define functions to be used in file1.py. Of course, these names file1.py, they're just arbitrary names. They're not actual names that you probably would use in reality. So let's define some basic functions in this file too. So def, we can do add numbers. This was from a function we made in a previous video. So this add numbers will take two numbers as arguments. It'll take a number A and a number B. And what it's going to do, let's document this function to be a good coder. This function adds together. Is that how you spell together? Okay, let's not take our chances. This function adds two numbers. That's it. And so what we are going to do is we could do this one of two ways. We could either just go return. We can have the function return the sum of a plus b. But for the sake of clarity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make result equals a plus b, and then we are going to turn result. And the reason I do this is because it's more, I believe it's more clear to the beginner what is going on in the code. Whereas if I were to just return a plus b, it's not as clear to the beginner. So what's happening is we are initializing a variable whose name is result, and result is equal to a plus b. So if a is a float, in data type float, maybe 1.0, if b is a float, say 2.0, then result, this variable, will be a float. And so the function add numbers will return the variable result, which is a float. So I'm going to document the parameters. So A is a float, just a float given by the user, and B is a float as well, or a floating point number. Okay, and now we will do another function, def multiply numbers. And actually, let's make this one a totally different type of function. So let's make this one what can I do? Let's make it def open file. Okay, so what we will give this is file name, and just what we will provide the file name here. And so what this function is going to do this function will open a file and write a string in it. And so we're also going to provide it with the string it's going to write in the file. So we'll put word here, okay? Or better yet, we'll put input. Oh, that's looks like it's already a predefined thing Python recognizes. So we'll put just data here. And so what we are going to do now is when this open file function is called, we're going to say f equals open. It's going to write the file name, and we're going to write f dot close. And by the way, this this thing here allows you to basically write two commands in the same line. So if I didn't have this semicolon here, it would the Python file would crash. You need to have the semicolon if you're going to write two separate commands in the same line in Python. And then what we are going to do is f equals open. Oh, by the way, this is overkill what I'm doing. So what I'm doing is just for illustrative purposes. File name. Now we're going to open file name, and we're going to add to it. Then we're going to do f dot write, and we are going to write a space. And then what we are going to do is we are going to this /n is a skip line. So we're going to go to the second line, and then we're just going to write data. And data is a string. So we need to make sure data is of type string. That's it. Okay. So now what we are going to do is we're going to close this, and we're going to go back into file 1. And now we need to import the functions from file 2 into file 1. So we're going to do that by import file 2. Okay. Now you don't need to do file2.py. It's just implicit when you do import file 2. So now in our main function, we need to give well, first let's call the functions. So if we want to access the function add numbers from file 2, we go file2 dot add numbers, and recall this add numbers takes two numbers as arguments. And so what we could do is write like 1.0, 2.0 here. What I'm going to do is just keep this arbitrary, so any two numbers a and b, which means we're going to pass these numbers to our main function. So main must know about a and b in order to pass a and b to add numbers. And don't forget that this add numbers function returns the addition of a and b. So we're going to have result here. So result is equal to what the function add numbers returns. And also what we are going to do is I want to open up the file and write to it with a string. So file2, I'm just going to go back to file2 quickly and get the function name. I'll just go like this. Okay. And here I'm going to also pass file name and data to the main function. And I'm going to put spaces between these arguments here just for clarity. And so let's document this quickly. So here we are going to add the numbers A and B. Okay. Once we've added the numbers A and B together, we are now going to open a file and write the sum of A and B. Now, this just came to my head. So what we're going to do actually is, because data is interpreted as a string with an open file, we're going to have to go back to file2. So let's save, exit, go back to file2, and we are going to have to write data as a, we're going to have to typecast it as a string if we want to write to the file in this format. And then we'll do f dot close here. So what's going to happen is we're going to call the function open file. We're going to pass it file name, and we're going to pass it data. And since data is going to be this result up here, it will be of the data type float. And so when you write to this file here, you have to write in the type string. And since data will be a type float, we have to typecast it as a string. And you do that by typing str in parentheses. If you wanted to typecast it as an integer, we would do int. If we wanted to typecast it as a float, which it already is, so there's no reason to do this, we would type float. But here we want to typecast it as a string. So let's save, exit out, go back to file 1. Okay, let's recap. So I have a main function here. I give it arguments A and B. Let's document what these are. A is a floating point number. B will be the same thing. So let's copy this. File name, the name of the output file to which we would like to write. And then data is the content of the output file whose name is file name. So then we come into main, and here's the section we're going to add the numbers A and B, and we do so by calling a function defined in a separate file. After we obtain this result, which will be of data type float, we are going to open up a file named file name, and we are going to write result in there. And so what's going to happen is when we call file2.openFile, we are going to, Python will compile this file, and there'll be a new file here called file2.pyc. This is just the compiled version of this file2. It will come into open file, and because we passed the file name and data, and notice data in the other file, I'm just going to go back quickly, is this result, it's going to read this result here, this parameter result, as data. So anywhere in this function you see the word data, it will actually be this result here, which I passed as data from the other file. And then what it's going to do is it's going to open a file. It's going to open the file name. It's going to write to it. It's going to close it. It's going to reopen it, add to it, do a blank space, and then write data. So let's go see if it works. So first things first, I have to now in the global scope call the main function. So I'm going to pass 1.0 as the floating point number A, 2.0 as the floating point number b. So we should be writing the number 3 in file name. File name we'll put as output.text, and data we actually don't need to have in here anymore, so I will delete that. Okay, so before I go and do this, let me just recap what we're going to do so we're all on the same page. Okay, so here I'm calling my main function. I'm passing to it 3 arguments. I'm passing to it 1.0, a floating point number, 2.0, a floating point number, and output.text, which is a string. Since I'm calling the main function, Python will look in this file for a function called main. It looks, it finds it. Okay, so I have passed the parameters a, b, and file name. Okay, just updated the documentation quickly. So now I come in, I'm going to add the numbers a and b. I'm going to do this by calling a function we defined in a separate file, and we access this function through this importing of the file. So in file 2, we have this add numbers defined, and here I pass to it a and b. And since add numbers returns the sum of a and b, this variable result will be the sum of a and b. What I then do is I'm going to open a file whose name is file name and pass to it this result. And when I go and write this result to that file, it will want to write a string in this file. And since result is currently a floating point number, I had to typecast it as a string. And then I should be done. So I'm going to save, and I'm going to go Python, there it is, file1.py. Let's run it. Usually, as experience shows in coding, there will be 1 or 2 bugs perhaps. So let's see. I press enter. There is no bugs. So let's go back. And you can see here, oh, here is file name. Looks like I had a small error somewhere. There is the 3.0, but it should be output.text. So we do have a small mistake somewhere, which is good because this is actually how you learn. Here is file2.pyc. This is known as the byte file, B-Y-T-E, and it is the compiled version of this file 2. And so you can see here when it went to compile my code, it skipped where I had comments. So you can see where I had the comments here. This is where I have the comments in the actual file. So when it goes to compile the Python file, it skips where there's comments. And you can see that here in the byte file. And so something is wrong because this should not be file name. This should be output. So let's go into file 2. Oh, see, I had a it looks like I had a F-I-L-E. Looks like I had a something, should be file. Oh, because I put it as a string. I should not put it as a string here because it already is a string. Okay, so I save and I exit. Let's delete this file name. And now the name should be this string I passed to it, output.text. So let's rerun it. Okay, you can see here I have output.text. And there it is. We have a space where we skipped, and we have 3.0 written to the file. So let's do it one more time. Go into file 1, and let's change the number from 1.0 to 10.0, and let's change this to 12.0, so our output should be 32. Let us just check, let us delete this compiled file, and delete output.text. You don't have to, but actually, let's not do it. Let's see it overwrite. So right now it has a 3 in it. Python file 1. Okay. And then I open up here, and here I have 22. Did I say 32 before? It should be, oh no, it's 22. Yep, it is 22. Okay. So I hope this video was useful. I think the next extension to this type of video would be to, instead of importing a file, it would be to import a Python class. And then where I want to take this beginner series is I want to write a molecular dynamics program, maybe give it a physics sort of twist, or we can keep doing other beginner videos like this, which will be very helpful. But we have to eventually move into doing something less abstract, because these definitions are very abstract and it may be hard to see the connection to practical applications of Python, especially within the scope of scientific computing. And so I think maybe we can move into more practical applications like that soon. In any case, thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.